Perched here, north of the 49th parallel, Canadians have had a front row seat for the fascinating, perplexing politics emanating from the U.S. Capitol. But proximity doesn't ensure insight, nor does it always capture how things are playing out in other countries or in the international order writ large. So tonight we're pleased to get a European perspective from Josef Joffe, editor-publisher of the weekly German newspaper Die Zeit, who joins us now for more, and it's a pleasure to finally have you in that chair.
Same here. We only talked via uplink.
That is true.
From Stanford.
Every time it's via satellite, and it's great to finally have you
here. And I'm all by
here.
myself here. I don't have to share the podium with anybody else.
Exactly. So willkommen.
I'm very proud, yes.
Let us start with a general comment about the education of the new president. He started saying NATO was obsolete, and now apparently he doesn't think that anymore.
No.
He started saying Russia's going to be a very close ally, and wouldn't it be great to get along? They sure aren't getting along anymore. He started by saying we have no business being in Syria, and he dropped bombs on Syria the other day.
Right.
Are you pleased at what appears to be the evolution of the president's thinking?
Well, yes, because for once I was right. I was wrong on him winning the primaries. I was wrong on him winning the election. I was wrong on Brexit. But I kept arguing in the last 60 days or so that reality will bite and that some of these things that you just mentioned cannot obtain, especially my new best buddy, as he called him, Putin, and that he would also rediscover that you can't just be the elephant in the china shop and ignore 70 years of American continuity in foreign policy, such as with NATO.
That's an interesting metaphor. So he's beyond the bull in the china shop. He's an elephant in the china shop.
Well, no, that metaphor still wouldn't work, because even a benign, very friendly elephant, being as big as he is and given the small size of china shops, just by twisting and turning would destroy a lot of stuff. But the point is that I expected reality to bite, and reality is biting. And you just mentioned some of the examples. We might just add another one. He also talked about destroying trade arrangements the United States had built over the last 60 years. So he seems to like NAFTA too. He won't put the axe to NAFTA.
And he's talked about tweaking it as opposed to killing it.
Yes. Well, that's a big difference, isn't it?
It is.
I'd rather be tweaked by you than killed.
Indeed. You did ask in a recent speech whether Donald Trump really wanted to take on Russia and China without the support of Europe, with whom he has been saber-rattling a lot of different countries lately. But depending on the day, he seems to be doing as much saber-rattling with Europe as snuggling up to Europe. What do you make of it all?
Well, right now, I don't think it's happening right now. I think the rhetoric, Trump's rhetoric has been pretty benign. And just yesterday, he said, no, NATO is no longer obsolete. Didn't you say that about 85 times in the campaign? Yes, I did, but I changed my mind. So there may be something about him. If we are benign about it, we say he has a learning curve, which I hope is the case. And if we were snide about him, we would say, well, it's depending on his mood, early morning Twitter moods. But I would put my money on the first part, because there are other items we have to keep in mind. For instance, or most importantly, how he staffed the administration.
Or doesn't.
Well,
yeah, a lot of jobs still not
filled.
I know,
there are a lot of jobs. I'm talking about the foreign policy and security part of the administration. So Jim Mattis, he was a colleague of mine at Stanford, is a superb guy.
For defense secretary.
He is a soldier scholar in the best tradition. He's no ideologue. People want to put down Tillerson as a novice. They forget that when he was head of Exxon, he had his own little State Department, about 80 affiliates and representations around the world. So he knows about that. I thought I was very heartened by the fact that Flynn, the former National Security Advisor, is out. And you have H.R. McMaster, another character, soldier scholar, no ideologue, in.
So there is some adult supervision there, is what you're saying.
Yes, and these are professionals, which of course Trump is not. And finally, I would mention somebody who is not as well known, but she's known in the strategic community. Fiona Hill is his main advisor on Russia, and she is a fierce critic of Putin's expansionism. So that all tells me that whatever he said in the campaign is being reversed in favor of professionalism and realism.
Okay, but having said that, you gave a speech the other night in Toronto in which you did lay out a pretty strong case for why we ought to be concerned with some of the things that Donald Trump is doing. And your good friend of 25 years, Conrad Black, whom people who watch this program I think know pretty well, said, take a chill pill, Josef. You Germans are worrying way too much about this guy.
He stole a line from me, because in the speech I said, given all that, what I just mentioned, the Europeans ought to, should no longer want to double their volume intake. They should cut down, because what we just mentioned should have been very reassuring, especially the bromance between the two of them being over. Because what are the Europeans always afraid of? Either there's too much conflict between Soviet Union, Russia, and the United States, which will kind of grind them up, or there's too much amity, meaning deals over their heads. So I think they should stop taking Valium by now.
This, for some people, is going to sound like a strange point to make, but I think you're on side with it, which is Trump a logical extension of Barack Obama's foreign policy insofar as Obama was already withdrawing America from the world, 2 wars, didn't intervene in Syria after drawing a red line, and Trump is now going even further into isolation?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, that's certainly the message that he proclaimed was America first, meaning we are not going to take care of business for the rest, be it in trade or security. He's told the Europeans, pay up or we pull out. You have an enormous debt that you owe to the United States. But you have to match that with the reality. The reality is that where Obama really tried to pull out of the Middle East in a very hard way, retract American power, he is reinserting American power in the Middle East. The example is the bombing. When it comes to Europe, well, as we speak, the U.S. is deploying battle units to the easternmost border of NATO, in Poland in this case. So that doesn't look like retraction. So the message the message you could draw from this is, let me repeat, reality bites, and the man is perceiving and understanding what the constraints and obligations of a great power.
Well, let's go even further, because a U.S. aircraft carrier is now moving into the Korean Peninsula in advance. Now, let's establish, we are sitting here on a Thursday taping this. It airs Friday, so what is transpiring over the next 24 hours or last 24 hours, depending on how
we know it's moving. The battle group is moving.
What we don't know yet is whether Kim Il-sung, to celebrate the 105th anniversary of the birth of the founder of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, whether to celebrate Kim Il-sung.
Impossible to keep apart.
Whether he's going to explode a nuclear device, have another test, or what. That's a pretty scary part of the world right now, and I wonder how nervous you are about it.
In very complicated, difficult situations like that, you want to maximize options. So you want to get out of the option either or, that if he readies a land-based missiles, gets it ready, maybe puts a warrant on top. You don't want to get into a situation where you have to preempt and start a war. So right now, the U.S. is adding options. There's that battle group, which is a show of force. But I'm pretty sure you'll see Aegis cruisers coming in, and Aegis cruisers have a system that can take out nuclear missiles in the boost phase as it goes up. I'm pretty sure that we, the Koreans, the Americans, will install another anti-missile system called THAAD, T-H-A-A-D, which can take out missiles as they're descend through the atmosphere, so on both counts. So that's a pretty good net, and I think it makes it clear, look, here are some limits. If you keep escalating and pretending that you're crazy, we are the guys in the white men, so to speak, who will restrain you. And these are the two systems. So again, it's the use of power for show purposes, to be sure, but that's not something that Obama would have done, I don't think. So there's a reassertion of American power. That's what I'm trying to say.
Which is different from what he was saying 3 months ago.
Absolutely.
Let alone 6 or 12 when he was campaigning.
Absolutely.
Right. I want to ask you about Germany and America right now, because we had the very odd spectacle just a couple of weeks ago of the most important leader in Europe, Angela Merkel, coming to the White House, doing a photo op with the president after what we were told was a pretty tense meeting, photographers asking for a handshake, and the president declining to shake the hand of the leader of the most important country in Europe.
Yeah.
What did you make of that?
That was Trump at his worst. You know, the White House has spun this, of course. He didn't hear or whatever. I would never make too much out of what people like you and me, journalists, make when they see a scene like that and they read a whole play into it. He likes her, he respects her, he knows that Angela is Europe's leader by default. By default. Who else is there? The Brits are on the way out. The French are caught in an interminable campaign, or we don't know what's going to come out of France. Italy, I don't know what the name of the current government is in Italy. I never remember because they've had over 60 since World War II. So by default, Angela is the queen of Europe. And I think he's said nice things about her. And if you want to talk about mistreatment of Angela, then you have to go back to the Kremlin where she visited Putin. And Putin had learned that she is afraid of huge dogs. And so they're sitting there, and suddenly this huge dog comes. Angela barely restraining herself.
So if you want to show disrespect, that's the way to do it.
Big dogs.
Big dogs as opposed to just a lack of a handshake.
Right.
Got it. We do remember, and I don't know if he actually said this, but he is alleged to have said, Henry Kissinger, that, when I want to deal with the European community and get their advice on foreign affairs, you tell me who to call. Give me a phone number. The suggestion
First
being...
of all, Henry Kissinger vehemently denies he ever asked the question. Old friend of mine, who was one of his staffers, actually did the research and found nobody who could confirm that he said it. But it's a great line, it doesn't matter. It's a great line. And we once asked Catherine Ashton, the previous foreign minister of the EU, say, does Europe have a phone number yet? She says, of course Europe has a phone number. It's mine. You dial that number, and then you get a computer voice. For Germany, press 1. For Britain, press 2. For France, press 3.
Well, it kind of makes the point. There is no phone number.
It makes the point there is no phone number. Look,
but is there today, Josef? Do you call Angela Merkel?
Look, it has always been Angela Merkel. And then in earlier times, you would have called, of course, the British Prime Minister. And as long as he was halfway safe in office, you would have called Sarkozy or Hollande. But right now, she is Empress by default. And, by sheer weight and size and power and so on, that's the go-to place.
Let me get a better understanding,
as long as nobody else shows up again.
Sure. Let me get a better understanding of two of the most important issues Germany has faced in the last few years, and what appear to be very different ways in which Chancellor Merkel has handled each situation. The refugees streaming across the border. That was the last time I think you and I talked on this program, and you were astounded at how well, first of all, at how open Germany opened its doors to these new refugees, and how well, relatively speaking, they were being embraced into the German population.
Did I say that?
You did. That was then. Hang on.
You shouldn't quote stuff at people.
Yeah, that's what we do here. Then I compare and contrast that with the way Merkel has really been tough and resolute on the whole issue of Greece and its finances, and not cutting them a break at all on that issue.
All right.
Why the different treatments in your view?
Two different issues. The million refugees or so that flowed in were in part forced on her because everybody else from Greece down just opened the border and told them to keep going, all the way into Austria. But she also she must have thought this was a moral gesture that needed to be done for the Germans. And in general, the Germans being very efficient people, they managed to deal with the influx on an organizational level. That said, that she unleashed the worst crisis in her long regency because that led to a backlash to the rise of populist parties, like the French or the Swedish or whatever. Suddenly, and they were suddenly polling double digits, and she realized that she had to do something about it, and she was being cut very nice slack. She could stay on the moral high road. No, we're not going to close our borders. But everybody else was closing their borders, all the way from the Turkish-Syrian border. So the influx has been cut down in a very serious way. As far as the Greeks are concerned, that's a different issue. I mean, if you want to maintain the euro, the premise is compelling. Whether it's working, we cannot be too sure. The idea was that everybody would somehow live within his means, maintain fiscal discipline, not too big a deficit, and what the economists would call, you can no longer devalue on the outside, you have to devalue on the inside, make yourself more competitive at home. And the Greeks didn't, and nor did the Italians, and nor did the French. And the Greeks are just the most grievous example. And they can't, and they make no, I mean, I don't see any sign that the Greeks are living up to the basic rules of monetary union. So what does that mean? I think whatever the Germans are saying and moaning and groaning, the Greeks have understood that we are not going to drop them, that we are going to keep paying for them. That's easy because Greece is a very tiny economy, so we can afford to pay for Greece.
What does she say?
The big stuff will happen with France and Italy.
Wir schaffen es?
Wir schaffen es was
about the refugees.
We'll do it.
We'll manage, right? We'll manage.
We'll manage. We'll do it. If the Germans, the logic of the Germans is right, unless we coordinate our fiscal and economic policies, this European currency is going to burst asunder. But we'll pay for you guys. For the little guys, we'll pay. We can afford you guys.
So I mean, we're an ocean away, but as we look at it from over here, one does wonder which will be the more compelling narrative as she runs for re-election. The fact that she had a big heart opening up the doors of Germany to the refugees, or the fact that she's sort of sticking it to the Greeks a bit?
I don't think the Greek issue plays any part in Germany. I mean, that's not something that they think about. What the electorate will respond to in September is, all right, she opened the doors and it was pretty bad and it created all kinds of problems, but she has managed. Wir schaffen das in another way. It has come down to manageable trickle. That's point one. And then the electorate will probably say, well, we've had it for 12 years. It's pretty boring. We've seen the same face all the time. On the other hand, look where we live now. There's Russian expansionism. There's this dude over on the other side of the Atlantic whom we can't quite figure out what he's going to do. There's terrorism. There's homegrown terrorism. So the uncertainty level is going up in our lives. And as she may be boring, but she knows what she's doing. And so in moments like that, we want to go with the tried and true. So I would, if you force me, I would bet that she'll be the next chancellor.
I'm not forcing you, but there
Force me to say something.
Yeah, there is something to this unsere Mutti business, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, Mutti, none of us really is enamored with Mutti, and they think she's sometimes quite of a nuisance because she tells you how to make your bed. But you know that you can count on her for putting food on the table, for keeping the house clean and to maintain order in the house.
Let's give our viewers a better understanding of who the prime challenger to her would be if she does run into some difficulty over the next period of time leading up to the September elections. Martin Schulz is the Social Democratic Party leader. I don't think anybody knows anything about this guy. What can you tell us that's important to know about him?
Well, if you had been one of those people sitting in the European Parliament, being well paid for not that much work, you would know Martin Schulz because he has been the eternal president. Martin Schulz is the new face, which is strange because he's been around for a long time. I mean, he's a real social democratic apparatchik. He's no surprise whatsoever. But in the context of Merkel having ruled for 12 years, he suddenly kind of bounced across, from Brussels, and he looked cool. He looked exciting, and bingo, he gained 10 points for his party, so Social Democratic Party, which the German or the French or the British party, they're all on the way down. I mean, this is the most grievous crisis for European social democracy. So he gained 10 points, but then the novelty wore off, and so Angie is pulling ahead again. And as I said, he's not a truly novel face. He's not a Trump. He's more like Jeb Bush. Okay, we've known him, or Little Marco, as Bush called him. So I put my money, given the rising uncertainty, that they'll put their money on the horse they know, which is the horse is absurd. Pardon the expression. The horse is Angela Merkel.
Okay. I want to ask you about this rise of populism across Europe and how significant you think it is. And to do that, let's acknowledge that the recent election in the Netherlands didn't go quite exactly according to Hoyle for Geert Wilders and his populist forces. They did better, but they didn't do nearly as well as they thought they would. We see that in France, it looks like it's going to, Marine Le Pen and her National Front initially had a very large lead, which appears to be chipped away at right now. That looks like a much closer contest than people had anticipated. How do you see populism and the concerning side of the forces that it's unleashing in Europe right now?
Well, we have to go back to what I said about Angela Merkel. The big rise in populism occurs in 2015 with this enormous influx of Syrian refugees, and so the nativist, if you wish, reaction sets in everywhere. With that flood receding, so are the fortunes of these populist parties you just mentioned. There's this Dutch guy, Geert Wilders, who did okay, but not as well as we thought he would. There is the German counterpart, I'm going to spare you the German name, I'll just call it by the initials AfD, which was in the double digits and is now down to single digits. To me, the only interesting joker in this game is Marine Le Pen, and for somewhat complicated reasons. If you look at her program, her ideology, and if you look at the hard left, like Mélenchon, you find that in ideological terms, the right-wing populists and the left-wing populists kind of overlap by about 60, if not more percent. What are these 60 or more? It's isolationism. It's protectionism. It's keeping out foreign workers and foreign goods. It's pulling up the drawbridges and clamoring for more protection by the state.
And it comes at you from both the right and the left.
Well, populism was always both left and right. If you go back in the United States, think about the worst version called National Socialism. Well, okay. So my nightmare is that you have a runoff between her and Macron, the pretty boy of French politics, the new face.
Who's what, 39 or 40 years
Something
old?
like that.
Yeah. Centrist kind of a guy, though.
Yeah, centrist, left-wing, pretty. We don't have faces like that in American politics, I don't think. But you also had Renzi in Italy, who was a kind of a pretty new face.
For a while.
For a while. So here's my nightmare. Just as we know from studies that Bernie Sanders voters went over to Trump, so I could think that the losing left here, that didn't make it into the runoff, okay, between the two, would vote for the hard right populists for Marine Le Pen. Could happen. And then we'd have a nice little surprise. if you force me again on pain of torture, I will say that the usual mechanisms in place have always been in place will assert themselves again. And so there's Marine Le Pen does very, very nicely in the first round, and then everybody else gangs up on her and votes for the establishment candidates. But watch out for the fact that populism is both left and right.
Mm-hmm. And I guess we should just take a second to explain. The way it works in France is that you have a first round of voting, and only the top two candidates go forward to the second round, presuming nobody gets 50% of the votes, which
Correct.
they won't
No,
get.
they won't.
And therefore, again, on pain of torture, you think that it looks like Emmanuel Macron will be the next French president.
That will be the old mechanism, except, in this case, when I look at the Mélenchon vote, and if I look at Germany, I see the right-wing populists there. They share a lot of ground with the hard left, and which that's called kind of pulling up the drawbridges. So watch. There's a joker in here, okay? There's a real joker in here, that the left and the right will unite, the hard left and hard left, in favor of Marine Le Pen. I don't think so, but it's very. You were just in Paris. What was your impression?
I was in Paris for a day. I wouldn't come to any hard
for
conclusions.
For a journalist, all you need is 2 hours to figure out what's happening.
Yeah, I guess I'm not a very good journalist because I wouldn't come to any far-reaching conclusions, having spent a day in Paris recently.
Okay.
Okay, let's finish up on this. I'll tell you, one of the fascinating things, and I did talk to some French Jews about this actually, is the new claim that Marine Le Pen is making, that Jews in France ought to vote for her National Front Party because she shares with them very distrustful values about the Muslims who live in France. Now that's a unique selling proposition if I ever heard one. What do you make of that?
It is very unique. Look, the most important thing is that she had to live down the distinct anti-Semitism of her father. And she understood that's a no-go.
Who's a Holocaust denier and a pretty sick guy.
Pretty sick guy. So, and she had been working on this very, very diligently over the years to kick out the Nazis, anti-Semites. She's appealing to something which let's put it this way, she's appealing to a divided Jewish soul, as we would have in this country, United States. On the one hand, Jews everywhere are liberal, progressive, open, internationalists. On the other hand, they are more worried than others, and rightly so, by the new Islamic anti-Semitism, of which you don't have to be crazy in France or paranoid to see.
There is evidence of it, of course.
To look at the attacks, and they are not against Israeli institutions, they're against Jewish institutions. Whether that will overcome the classic ideological stance of Jews, that they'll forsake their liberalism and vote for somebody like her, I really don't know. And I haven't looked at the numbers, but I will. I don't think it will. It's just like in the United States, whatever happens, Jews vote liberal. They may go to Reagan, as some of them did, but I don't know, 80% of Jewish voters in the States go for the Democrats.
It's fascinating because
But I don't know about French Jews. I don't know that many of them. But I will look at opinion polls. It's a very fascinating question.
I was just going to say, we'll watch with fascination. Then we should get you back in the fall, around time for the German elections, and see how that goes. Okay. It's been lovely having you here in person.
Yes.
Josef Joffe.
Same thing.
Editor of the Zeit.
And teaching at Stanford.
And teaching at Stanford, which we know because we usually get you out of California.
Got to make a pitch for Stanford too.
Wiedersehen und ausgezeichnet.
Thank you. Your German is ausgezeichnet too.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.